Sure. Can everyone hear me? Excellent. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Catherine Wang. So I head up our public sector team at a company called Sandbox AQ. For anyone who's unfamiliar with us, we live at the strategic intersection between AI and quantum technology. So not quantum computing, but quantum technology, where we're taking real global problems right now, applying quantum principles to solve those problems in the realm of quantum simulation, quantum sensing, quantum navigation, and for the purposes of our conversation today, quantum cryptography or cybersecurity.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jacques Henderson. Some of you were here earlier this morning. Thank you. I am president of SquarePeg Technologies. SquarePeg Technologies is an enterprise data solutions company. And when it comes to making sense of information, that's where SquarePeg comes into play. We also have a PQC capability as well. So whether it be making sense of sensitive sources from intelligence customers or making sense of IT cryptographic assets, SquarePeg has the tools, the techniques, and capabilities to help our customers move forward.
Hello, everybody. My name is Evgeny Jervis. I'm a CEO of a company called SafeLogic. Thanks so much for having us here today to Marion Square and Carahsoft. Really appreciate the opportunity. So SafeLogic, we're a cryptographic software vendor. We've been in business for over 13 years. What we do is we implement cryptography to the very rigorous standard from the National Institute of Standards, so around FIPS standards. So we implement FIPS 140, validate cryptography, and people license our cryptographic modules so that they don't have to do this themselves, and rather than spending 2+ years trying to get those certifications, they use SafeLogic modules to really accelerate and streamline that whole journey. Right now, we're very focused helping our customers migrate from FIPS 140-2 to FIPS 140-3. Many of you may know that FIPS 140-2 standard will be sunsetting next September, so it's important to do this migration. And of course, the other great migration in our space is to post-quantum cryptography. So we've been working on that for a long time, implementing cryptography again to the standards that are coming out of NIST for post-quantum, and making sure that we can support our customers with the PQC transition as well.
Hello? Okay, great. Hey, and I'm Harvey Morrison. So I'm back. I saw most of y'all earlier today, so I had something to eat. I feel much better now, but I'm the co-founder and CEO here at Marion Square. So thanks for the panel to be here today. We're really looking forward to it. Sorry about the issue with the laptop, but we'll go ahead with the questions.
We can.
I will say for anybody who is in the audience or works from home, I would highly recommend getting one of these chairs because the level of core engagement that I have to initiate to not fall out is next level. So I would, anybody who's in the room today, come up here afterwards and sit in one of these chairs. It is, it's an Olympic sport.
All right. Well, with that, I'd like to start off with a question here, maybe for Jacques and Kat to address, at least to start off. And what we really are is, if you look at the discovery and inventory are foundational, to a successful PQE transition. What do you think are the most important aspects of cryptographic discovery that agencies really need to be focused on?
All right. Let me first start by saying that time is our greatest currency. So the fact that all of you showed up here today or are watching with us online means that you understand the criticality of data protection. So thank you for caring about that. The second point that I would say is, when I look at the wider ecosystem and cybersecurity experts in general, the big problem that we have is we have to defend successfully every single time. Cyber adversaries only need to be successful once, right? Which is why we all exist today. And there's a huge need for skilled labor to support this cyber resilience. So when we think about mounting attacks from advanced persistent threats, cyber criminals, anything that we're trying to defend from a national security level, there's going to be more work to be done than people that are there to do it. So instead of thinking about cryptography from a technology standpoint, I think about it from a data protection standpoint. At some point, the adversaries are going to get in. And when that happens and all other technologies fail, your cryptography cannot. That is the key point that I think brings us all together here today and why we all exist. It takes, actually, let me rephrase that. 60% of startup companies do not exist within 6 months of a breach. Everything comes back to data. And as we talked about earlier, good data informs good AI. AI powers our ability to innovate and to modernize. It all comes back to the need to have strong cryptographic principles that are not only effective for today, but also carry into the future of cryptographic agility. So I would say that is core to what we need to prioritize, not only as a company, but also at a national level.
So in terms of discovery, so when you think of discovery of cryptographic assets, that really means you're trying to figure out what you have. And when you look at the federal government, or even when you look at your iPhone, you pull out your iPhone, you probably have no idea how many apps are on there that are granted by third parties that have all types of information that's being collected on you. So when you mirror that towards the federal government and them actually trying to understand what they have in terms of all of their assets, their certificates, their keys, any types of operations, it is a monumental task that I don't think anyone is really expecting. We don't know no one knows what they're really going to see once you open the kimono up, especially for larger government agencies that have been doing status quo, doing business for years, focused on their mission, rightfully so. But when you think in terms of discovery, the first thing is really just trying to get an understanding of what we have. And that's why SquarePeg is a data company. We're all about making sense of data. And when you're trying to make sense of what your infrastructure has, that's probably the most important piece.
Yeah, if I could add something there, I think to both what you all were saying. I think the thing agencies and organizations really need to be prepared for to have a successful discovery and inventory is a plan for remediation. Because once information is exposed, issues are exposed, you have to correct them, right? So, one, don't go along with your head in the sand thinking we're all going to be good, we're all safe, nothing's broke. You need to do the discovery and inventory to identify those things. But then I think just as critical is you have to be prepared for the remediation piece of it. You can't you're going to find issues, and you can't just find the issues and then hope they go away. You're going to have to address those issues. So I think that's, if I'm thinking about, that's probably the biggest thing that you need to think about in looking or getting prepared for the discovery and the inventory.
I'll just jump in here as well for a second, kind of echo what Harvey was saying. I have the honor of leading a working group, NIST. It's a NCCOE, it's PQC migration and prioritization project, and Sandbox is one of the collaborators as well. So we have a number of great companies. And those are the types of things we're trying to figure out, because there's a lot of different tools. You may run one tool, you may run different discovery tools. You may get some telemetry for some of the existing tooling you already have in your environment. And the question then becomes, like Harvey said, what do you do with this, right? If you have multiple tools running, you're going to have to normalize all the data somehow. There's going to be duplicates, so you're going to have to normalize that. You're going to have to perform correlation, meaning before you can start prioritizing, you're going to have to figure out what do you care about. So like as you uncover, different, usage of cryptography, what are those cryptographic controls actually protecting? So you're going to have to map it somehow to higher level, CMDB and information about the assets, and then based on the criticality of those assets and based on the longevity of those assets and other factors, only then will you be able to start prioritizing. And that's going to be important because when you run the tools, and we see this, experience with NIST, you might find thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of findings. So without having that plan for how you're going to actually correlate and prioritize, you're just kind of going to be, lost on that. So I think that's often overlooked, but very important component of dealing with this.
All right, thank you. Another follow-up, I guess, would be, what we hear quite a bit about is harvest now and decrypt later. So from your perspective, what do you think the real threat is to that? And is it real? And are the agencies moving fast enough to, address that?
So we talk about post-quantum cryptography in relation to quantum computing, right? So depending on who you talk to, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years have all been quoted. I think the big thing here is to realize that it's not just a harvest now, decrypt later. It's a harvest now, decrypt now, right? So there are plenty of examples where if you don't know where your cryptographic assets sit, it doesn't require quantum computing to exploit those vulnerabilities. That's why asset inventorying is critical. And I want to say this isn't just a glass half empty perspective, right? There are entities out there that have grown faster than their SOC teams can catch up with. And that's probably true for most organizations out there. So as you become a victim of your own success, you're bringing on new vendors, you're bringing on new employees, you're bringing on new supply chain, you're bringing on new hardware. Every single one increases the threat vector for access if you don't know who is accessing your cryptological, your data assets and why, right? So it really does come back down to ensuring the basics of zero trust are secure and applied, especially as we think about you growing and bringing on AI platforms that we talked about earlier this morning that now have access to your infrastructure.
To get back to harvest now, decrypt later. So I do think the government is moving too slow. I think that was the second part of your question, right? Because when you think of all the breaches that have happened from GSA years ago to OMB to the IRS recently, what's not being said is how much of that information can those adversaries actually use, right? We don't know. And how much is encrypted. For example, I'm a Mac guy, right? I'm a Mac guy. And on my Macintosh, you can encrypt your data on your Macintosh, right? If you go into your settings, you can see that it's encrypted. So if someone steals it, it's going to be hard for them to get to it. But with the advent of a quantum computer, they now have access to everything that I've had on my laptop. And I think that's going to be a thing that happens in real time for the government. So whether you're a Department of State foreign officer serving overseas, maybe a laptop was stolen, right? And these things happen, right? And someone takes that and now they have it. So it is a real threat of that person now being able to go back and make sense of all that information, which could be detrimental to obviously national security or even just your personal well-being as a citizen of the United States.
Yeah, I think if you look at data, and the question you have to be asked is this data going to be valid 5 years from now, right? And if the data is going to be valid 5 years from now, 6 years from now, like your social security number, let's say as an example, it's at risk right now. If you follow the quantum computing space, and just over the last 12 months between AWS, Google, Microsoft, right, all launching their own quantum chips. The folks in China used a D-Wave optimization computer to crack RSA, which everybody thought was a factoring problem, but they've now turned it into an optimization problem. AI now coming out and making things faster, better, discoveries better. I don't think anybody really knows exactly when it's going to happen, but it wouldn't surprise me if all of a sudden it popped up and we figured out a different way to use a quantum computer to break RSA. And the last thing that I'll say, and I back everything up against this, is from a federal government perspective, how long do you think it's really going to take to transition to post-quantum cryptography? I mean, they're not going to wake up one day and go, okay, FY26 is the year we're going to transition and everything gets done. It's going to take, OMB estimates $7 billion over the next 10 years. I think we're in the window right now, and folks need to be doing it. And back to your point with the discovery and inventory piece, they need to be doing that now, not just for post-quantum, but to get a sense as to where they're at and what their risks are now. With zero trust and everything being focused on that's a big part of that. The visibility that you need to have in your infrastructure, you need to be starting that now anyway. So that's my thoughts on it.
And there are tools. the tools for doing all of that exist today already. You have great resources, Square Peg is one of them, that can already do these inventory analyses for us, right? So while the government may take a crawl, walk, run approach, there's no reason why this cannot be started today for all the aforementioned reasons, like today's advanced persistent threats that you'd mentioned, and then thinking about a future-proofing approach as we continue to grow, bringing on more vendors, data assets, AI platforms to kind of like make sure that we don't lose that as quantum Q-Day gets closer.
Yeah, so just to kind of add to what everyone was saying, totally agree. So yeah, harvest now, decrypt later is real, and yes, we're already behind, and like the saying goes, you know, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, you know, the next best time is today, right? Here's what I want to say. If you remember anything from what I say today, here's, I think, a key point. As you sort of start thinking about this PQC migration, don't think of this as a big sort of waterfall project, right? I mean, in the world of IT, I think we kind of realized a long time ago that waterfall projects is probably not the best way to approach, right? There is a reason we kind of adapted, for the most part, as an industry, agile approach, iterative, right? So the question should you be asking yourself is this, not like, am I quantum safe today? Nobody is, right? The question should be, am I going to be more quantum safe tomorrow than I am today? And am I going to be better the day after? So in other words, don't think of this, you need to do a year of planning, a year of discovery, a year of prioritization, and only then can you start migrating. Do this in sprints, right? You can start figuring out what you have in your environment today. And harvest now, decrypt later, right? You have data in transit, right? A lot of that data in transit, I'm just using as an example, we'll be using TLS connections. Well, guess what? The good thing is that there's already quantum-resistant implementations of TLS. We'll talk about crypto agility in seconds. TLS actually, by its very nature, is already very crypto agile. So there's actually things you could be doing today to start protecting, right, those communication links, and essentially start taking away good chunks of that harvest now, decrypt later sort of attack vector. So again, think about how you can actually do this incrementally in sprints over time. Because it's the problem is large, and it's very easy to kind of sort of admire it and perhaps even have this paralysis by analysis. Don't let yourself succumb to that. Roll up the sleeves and actually start getting yourself, kind of continuous improvement is I think is the way to approach it.
Yeah, and just one last comment. I agree with everything you're saying, but I think the fundamental way to start is to have the visibility into where are you now, which goes back to the discovery and inventory. Like, I don't know why folks are waiting on that. Again, it's foundational. Like, you have to know where you're at to get started, right? To even start to build the plan, you have to know where you're at. And that's and it's not a one-time thing either, right? It needs to be a program that you're building, doing it on an annual basis or a regular basis, because your environment's always changing. So that's...
I like calling it get a data MRI.
That's very interesting. I think as a follow-up, I would say is basically what you're saying, it's not a one-and-done process, right? But this is a continual process you've got to do with your data continually over time, as you had mentioned. So what do you think some of the best practices would be for agencies to maintain that so that they are continually ready and migrating and always up to current standards?
I would say, like we hit it, you got to start, right? I think that's fundamentally the thing, right? And Jacques and I've talked about this quite a bit, and his company's doing a lot of work in the space, and you can maybe mention it, but I think for federal agencies, it's not just a technology buy. Like, everybody's getting technology pushed at them. I think it's an overall program to help them out. Like, hey, we can come in, and we have great partners like Sandbox and SafeLogic, where we can put a program together for you to help you, install and get your discovery done almost as a service, and then help you with a gap analysis and help you. I think that's what agencies are looking for and organizations are looking for. And the group up here is actually, I think, a really good group to be thinking about from an overall sort of solution. I'll let you talk a little bit more, Jacques, but that's kind of my thought, is what they need to get started is not another technology vendor saying, buy my tech. It's here's an overall program that's going to help you generate your reports. It's going to help you do your gap analysis and all those hard things.
So I think a best practice is when you think of zero trust architecture and authentication and security of your data, the philosophy of it, right? And when you look at PQC and what it means to integrate into zero trust architecture, I think the best practice that we're approaching from SquarePeg is making sure those are tightly coupled, right? Because you can't separate the two. And with that comes along with making sure you have a strong governance side along with that, right? Without governance, nothing goes anywhere. Obviously, we all know it's just hard to move things through any types of approvals. It's hard to get your budget. So starting with governance and also starting with a champion, someone who really believes in, someone who's looking down the road versus as opposed to right now on the Cat's point and Evgeny's point, it is very much folks are waiting, but without governance and incorporating that into zero trust architecture, I think it's going to be challenging for even players in the game, for technology players, or even government individuals to make sense of the information.
And just to kind of dovetail on that, I think the best practice is really something we should have been doing all along, is to manage cryptographic risks as part of your overall risk management program, right? Because cryptography is foundational, whether we're talking about zero trust or authentication. At its core, it's cryptographic controls that help support that. I kind of often talk about this analogy with some success. I kind of think of cryptography as plumbing in your house, like piping, right? I mean, it really, without it, you can't really live in the house, right? And when the pipes are not leaking, the water is flowing, most people don't care about the pipes, right? When the pipe bursts, right, it becomes the most urgent problem, right? So think of cryptography as this underpinning of digital, privacy and trust in the digital world. And we've been lucky, for the most part, it's been working for us. But right now we're about to start discovering that we have a lot of polybutylene pipes that they're going to start leaking. We're going to have to go and replace them with, copper piping, right? So that's going to be a big project, but essentially the main thing is to not look at this as a standalone effort, is look at it, as a way, so you have an organizational threat model. You should know what sensitive data you have, how you're protecting it. Cryptographic controls are certainly some of that, right? So making sure that you begin to manage cryptography, again, as part of the sort of overall, like others have mentioned, sort of your cybersecurity risk management program. Because PQC is what we're dealing with right now. It's not going to be the next transition. The next time there's a heartbleed or something that gets announced, you want to know very quickly where you have it in your environment and be able to essentially remediate the problem, right? So I kind of equated, a few years ago, there's issues with supply chains, and, we had, things like, well-publicized attacks, right, with supply chain was the problem, software supply chain. So we've largely started solving the problem with S-bombs and everything. Well, right now there's a similar concept, C-bomb. Cryptographic bill of material, to know really where is your cryptography, where are you relying on cryptographic controls to protect your sensitive data, and specifically what are you using, and we'll talk about cryptogility in a second, but being able to migrate to something else as quickly and as painlessly as possible, right? So again, I would look at it as part of your overarching cyber risk management program. It really underpins and a key risk management control, not as some silo project. It really shouldn't be a silo project.
So the industry that I would highly recommend everyone take a look at, who was first mover on this, is doing a very good job, in my opinion, in leading the charge on data asset discovery and cryptography, is the financial sector, for very obvious reasons. There's not a single human being in this room or watching this video right now that probably doesn't have an online bank account, right? So if they are now, and what the fascinating thing is 10 years ago, if you went to a bank or a financial institution and said the words digital transformation, they look at you weird. They want you to be in their banking centers. Now with digital transformation, everything has to move online, increasing the aperture for digital attacks and cyber attacks. So when we're thinking about, well, I don't know if I want to be the first mover here, these are large, institutionalized, decentralized legacy systems. And if they can do it, and they can do it well, for the good of the American people and the financial underpinning for America, this is definitely doable for the United States government.
Evgeny, a few minutes ago you mentioned crypto agility. So I was wondering if you could talk more about what that really is and how does it impact the current zero trust programs going and initiatives in the government today.
I do have thoughts on this, but Evgeny mentioned it twice, so I'm going to let you go first.
Sure. Let me know what I forget. So absolutely. I can tell you that there's actually no necessarily universal definition of crypto agility. The reason that I know this, like NIST recently had a project. They actually just released some white papers on crypto agility. There was a lot of discussion among people in the industry and to know like exactly what that means, because you can think of this at a lot of different levels and layers. But the way I kind of think about this, from my perspective is, you have cryptography out there, right? And again, if you realize there's a, CVE that comes out, or there's a NIST deprecates a particular algorithm you need to migrate, or for other reasons, if you have to switch out that cryptography, how much pain is it going to be, right? For instance, do you have all your cryptographic usages hard-coded in your custom applications, and then if you have to switch something, do you have to go change the code, recompile the applications, test them again, so redeploy, right? I mean, in many ways, you're going to be there right now. From a protocol level, like I mentioned, we're actually fortunate that there's many protocols like TLS actually bake in a certain degree of crypto agility already that allows you to do this. So if you think about like a typical TLS handshake that's happening, there's a lot of crypto agility because essentially both sides of the communication are trying to establish what is the most secure set of algorithms they can both use that they both support, right? So again, there's crypto agility in the protocol itself. But this is going to be important because, like I mentioned, there's a kind of like a plumbing project, right? We have to go in, rip out, take out, the polybutylene pipes, install the new pipes. As we go through this project, if we're not building in such that you put in the new pipes in a way that's going to be crypto agile, we basically are going to have to go through similar efforts in the future when there are future cryptographic transitions. And that's definitely going to be the case. I mean, like others have mentioned, there's still additional algorithms that are coming that are going to be standardized by NIST. I was actually just at the National Cryptologic Foundation event on Tuesday, same day that NIST announced that in addition to MLChem, which is the kind of quantum-resistant key exchange mechanism based on lattices, they're actually going to standardize another one called HQC that's going to be based on different type of mathematics because they want to have some diversity in the selections. So that's going to take another year to standardize, and it's going to take even longer to actually get it through the FIPS process. So there's going to be other transitions. So as you go through this project of remodeling your house, changing cryptographic piping, it's important that you do that in a way that's crypto agile. So that's going to mean asking those questions of your vendors, and not only how do they support you with PQC transition, but how do they do that in a crypto agile way. Certainly looking at your initiatives, like, again, we talk about zero trust as one example. Obviously cryptography that functions properly, right? That's up to code is foundational to that as well. So, how you kind of, a lot of the time it's nice to kind of attach it to something like ZTA initiatives because that may have, an existing funding vehicle vis-a-vis, PQC. Maybe people are kind of still, again, thinking about this as a silo. So yeah, crypto agility is extremely important that you're kind of building this in as you're going through this cryptographic migration. There's we don't know exactly when the quantum computer will come. But we would consider crypto agility as one of those things as we would call it a no regret move, right? Because no matter what, there's going to be future transitions. There have been past transitions that have been, you've been spending a lot of time and effort on. I'll just give you one example real quick. So SHA-1, all right, hashing function that has been shown vulnerable many, many years ago, right? If you do your inventory today, you'll still unfortunately see plenty of examples of SHA-1 because it is difficult to do the transitions, especially when you don't have crypto agility. You'll even find MD5 in there, So there's definitely things that you can remediate today that are actually going to help you be more secure against even the classical attacks. Not even to mention the quantum attacks, but Yeah, I'll let you. Yeah.
So, in the chance that we have folks dialing in, watching this, or in the audience that is not as familiar or subject expertise for the traditional forms of cryptography and different algorithms and whatnot, cryptographic agility is risk mitigation. So, a good example of this is, in getting here today, I had 4 different options. I could have taken public transportation. I could have driven myself. I could have taken a rideshare, a Lyft or an Uber, or I probably could have gotten a ride from a friend, right? Depending on the traffic, depending on the weather, depending on any other scenario, I had 4 options. That is essentially cryptographic agility, the option to switch off depending on whatever your policy, your needs, or the risks are. So if we apply that to business operations, government entities and agencies, if we notice, and this is all predicated on the fact that you can see a list of all your asset inventory, that there's an attack that's happening on one specific type of algorithm, then you have the ability to go in and swap it for something else. You have the ability to add additional layers of policy on it. You can add what we like to call the double wrapped burrito, the Crunch Wrap Supreme for any Taco Bell fans out there, where we're not only adding levels of current cryptographic safety, we're adding post-quantum cryptographic safety on top of that as well. So at a high level, that's how I see cryptographic agility.
I kind of see it as, again, you do your inventory and you come out with all these issues, right? And some of them are going to be potentially quantum issues, but a lot of them right now are going to be just classic encryption problems. Back to your foundation, your note of encryption, sort of the foundation of everything. So what you want to be able to do is quickly address the current classic quantum issue today, but you don't want to lock yourself in. So 3, 4, 5 years from now, when it is time to perhaps move to a post-quantum algorithm, you have to then start all over again, right? When I think of crypto agility, it's I can solve my problem today that I've identified, right? And then I have the ability to very quickly or efficiently transition that over time as new threats come out, as new requirements come out, executive orders come out, those sorts of things. So that's how I like to think about crypto agility.
Is there any?
You guys got it. We're good. Talk to now.
Is there any questions so far from the crowd that would like to ask any questions before we move on? We have one online question.
Yes, one question is, what specific PQC requirements are coming? And if this cryptographic transition is so critical, why is migration slow for both government and commercial?
Well, I guess I was going to say, like, what's coming, it's already out. Like NSM 10 and OMB 2302, like they're there. So it's not a situation like, what do we think's going to come and what do you have to do? It's there. I think Harvey Morrison's opinion, why it's been a little slow, is it really has to do with government budgets and timing. Meaning, when NSM 10 and OMB 2302 came out, it was kind of midway through a government year, and so the budgets had already been set for the following year. And now we've got this sort of crazy thing where we're 5 months through the current government year, and hopefully we'll get some sort of budget today. And I think once we get past that, I mean, the mandates are there. The research we at Marion Square have done, I've actually seen organizations are starting to set aside budgets to do this. And we've actually had conversations, the team here has, with several agencies that have said, hey, look, we know it's a requirement. We've stood up our PQC working groups, and we're kind of ready to get started. So I think a lot of it has been, it came out last year, the budgets were already passed, so they had to plan for it this year, and now we've had some uncertainty, if you will, so hopefully that's going to get resolved today. I know everybody's probably watching that. And I think as we go forward into the latter part of this year, there's going to be a bigger emphasis and a bigger push on it to get it done. That's my feeling. And then lastly, sorry, just one last thing, is I think what slowed a lot of agencies down in getting started is they're like, hey, we can do our discovery and inventory, and and we can find issues, but NIST hadn't come out with the algorithms to say, these are the algorithms you're going to have to transition to. So I think a lot of folks pushed it off there as well too. But now that those algorithms are out, I think that's going to be a driver as well.
So I think a part of it too is also organizations. We do have a bit of the luxury of time, right? And that in itself creates all types of issues. I was just telling Robert Williams from Sandbox that I'm in the process of moving right now. So throughout my moving process, I've discovered, in my discovery process, a set of keys in a drawer, right? And honestly, I have no idea what these keys were for. And I go into my bedroom, I discover another set of keys. And again, I'm like, what are these keys for that I don't have? I had no idea. But I no longer have the privilege of luxury because I have to move in a couple of weeks. So when you magnify that through the government lens, right, until they have to or until something happens, I think it's going to be a slow-moving process for the government because you do have a little bit of luxury because and quite frankly, there's rules out there, right? There's mandates through OMB, et cetera, but when you really start to put the fuel on the fire, there'll likely be some early adopters, but then the government is large. It's going to be a long tail of people who are likely going to wait until they have to move as well later into the 2030s.
Just to follow up on that, OMB did put their note out, 3 or 4 months ago where they said, hey, we're going to invest $7 billion over the next 10 years. So it wasn't like we're going to do it all in 2 years. So I think to your point, it's the program is going to be a long program. Yeah. And I think you're going to start seeing folks moving, I think, this fiscal year now that the budgets are hopefully being taken care of.
I'm going to add a socioeconomic layer to this that hopefully resonates with everybody who's watching as well. It's a cultural systemic problem. Somehow between the 1950s and today, during digital transformation, all the incredible things that the companies out of the United States have kind of brought us into the next world of digital transformation, we have forgotten how to play the long game and the value of our digital identities. I'll give you an example. In October of 2022, the equivalent of the MyGov or the Health and Human Services within the country of Australia was breached. There was massive outcry from the Australian people saying that the government needs to do better. All of their data was out publicly, right? Healthcare information. This is very sensitive information. Their outcry was so significant that the Australian Cybersecurity Administration was able to come up with a cybersecurity strategy within 6 months. They went so far as to say that they were going to be the most cybersecure country in the world by 2030. That's bold. Now, I'd say somewhere, I want to say January of 2023, so early a year ago, the Social Security Administration was breached as well. All of our SSNs are out in the public. I had to have someone tell me that because it didn't show up in my newsfeed, and I'm in cyber. Like, my algorithm is optimized to show me cyber intrusions, and it didn't even make the front page news. We, as a collective, need to hold these entities, whether it's public or private, more accountable for our data. If we're going to vote, we should vote with our wallets as well. Make sure that they have the certain criteria to understand where our data lives, how cryptographically agile or secure it is today, and know that they've done everything they possibly can to protect our digital identities. That's one of the reasons why I think the government didn't feel as much pressure to move quickly. Because you just mentioned 3 cyber breaches in the federal government within the last 6 months.
Well, I think it goes back to remediation in that we don't want to run a cryptographic inventory because if we do, we're going to find problems. We know we are, and then we're going to have to fix them, right? And I think that gets back to, again, part of the problem is ignorance is bliss right now. And back to what you were talking about, I think that is part of the problem.
Yeah, and I think you're about to see a lot of acceleration. I think it's going to go very quickly from like, why are you talking about this to like, are we quantum safe yet, right? So, and we're actually seeing this, I mean, being the front line, even outside the government, like in the private sector. I can say like maybe 2 years ago when we talked about PQC migration during, business reviews, with our customers. It was kind of tangentially interested, but we can kind of see that people were not yet ready. I think, like Harvey mentioned, the big switch was last August. I was actually honored to have been invited to the White House when they actually announced the standardization of 3 PQC algorithms. Ever since then, every single business review we have at SafeLogic with customers, people want to know about PQC. They're getting ready. They're adapting our solutions for that, for PQC migration, because they're being asked by their customers, who are public sector and private sector. So things are changing very quickly, and we can already see that very vividly. Just kind of living and breathing this, and I think it's going to start becoming more obvious to the broader community as well.
I think one thing I'm starting to hear when I talk to customers too is there's a large educational aspect of this as well, right? And customers not necessarily understanding what needs to happen in the transition. And also, I think a large part that is confusing for people is just by the word quantum being in even on this panel, right? I think some people may confuse quantum with quantum computing, with quantum communications, with all these different things that are quantum, but fundamentally this comes back to a security issue. And one thing that SquarePeg has started to do when we engage with our customers, a part of our engagement process is an education process, a small education process. What do you need to know as your CISO, right? What do you need to know in terms of quantum information sciences at a high level, right? That way you can speak that. Right? What do you need to know what that means for quantum computing? What do you need to know what that means for encryption and post-quantum cryptography? So that part of just educating, I think, is going to hopefully accelerate the adoption of moving towards quantum PQC a lot faster, but just because people have a better understanding of what it is they really, really need to focus on.
To follow up on that, if you look at the FIPS 140-3 new encryption certification, how does that impact the transition process, when you look at post-quantum?
I love that question. I'll take that.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, there are currently, I would call, number of sort of tsunamis of change in the world of cryptography. And certainly for the public sector, as you all know, whether you're subject to FedRAMP, common criteria, DoD APL, or just general FISMA requirements. In most cases, when you have cryptographic controls that protect federal data in transit or in storage, you need to be using FIPS Validate cryptography. And that requirement is not going away just because we also have to migrate to post-quantum cryptography. So what does that mean? It means, well, when you migrate to PQC, you also have to make sure that that post-quantum cryptography has gone through the NIST FIPS validation process. And therein lies a little bit of a problem because it takes time to go through the NIST process. First of all, you could not start going through the process until the standards are there, which just happened last August. So right now, SafeLogic and other companies, I'm sure, are going through the full NIST process. We actually just received cryptographic algorithm validation program, so kind of CAVP certification for MLChem, which is, like I mentioned previously, is the key exchange mechanism, so it's really useful in TLS. So when you're going through this migration and you're talking to your vendors, ask them not only do they have a PQC strategy in the cryptography that they have in their products, but also what is their strategy to do that in a way that is validated through FIPS 140-3 validation, because both of those have to be answered. And so what we see right now as a nice, perhaps intermediate step, and I really like your analogy of the burrito, right, and multiple layers. So we kind of talk about that as hybrid, hybrid implementation. So essentially, what you can do right now to meet both PQC requirements and FIPS requirements until you sort of get those fully FIPS 140-3 validated PQC algorithm solutions out there, is essentially take the hybrid approach where you can have a layer of already FIPS 140-3 validated classical cryptography, and you can sort of layer on top of that a use of PQC. So technically that would allow you to check both the PQC compliance box and also FIPS 140-3 compliance, and also allows you to do that in a way that if you're concerned about defense in depth, it kind of like allows you to have that right now. So, but yeah, those are kind of two sides of the same coin, because a lot of the time in history, the problem with cryptography really has not been using an insecure algorithm. It's been using an implementation that had weaknesses in it, right? So it's very important that as you are migrating to PQC, you don't migrate to any implementations that have not been properly vetted. So to use my previous example, you're replacing the polybutylene pipes with the new copper pipes, but you want to make sure that those new pipes are up to code, right? Up to plumbing code in the world of, there's plumbing code in the world of cryptography. That code is really the FIPS standard, especially for the public sector. That means that the implementation has gone through rigorous testing by the labs, rigorous testing by the National Institute of Standard Cryptographic Module Validation Program. So certainly as you migrate to PQC, you want to make sure you're also migrating to PQC that is FIPS 140-3 valid.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say it's not only affecting government agencies, but those that sell to government. So I mean, just to kind of make sure it's totally clear that if you sell to government and you use FIPS 140-2 encryption, by September, I think, of next year, you have to upgrade to FIPS 140-3, essentially. So if you want to continue to sell to government. So that's something, that folks here in the room and folks online that are the vendors in the community wanting to sell to government, that's something to definitely keep in mind.
I'll tell you what I'd like to do then is ask if you could give the agencies one piece of advice to help accelerate their transition to PQE, what would that be?
Call me. Oh, no, I would say...
I like it.
I think we're done. You dropped your mic.
I thought this was going really well when I dropped a reference to Taco Bell earlier. Right. So thanks for everybody for your patience and your humor. And this. No, yeah, I'm from California. We love our Mexican food. So I would say do not wait, right? There's a reason why we get up every morning and we brush our teeth. There's a reason why we get in the car and we put on our seatbelt. There's a reason why we care to do these things. This is basic hygiene. We need to care about our data. We need to care about it today. PQC is on the horizon, but there are plenty of reasons. This is mostly because of our inability to just see what we have and who has access to it for that data to get exploited today. So yes, I would say please care about this. Please make sure that your partners, your vendors, your suppliers, they care about this too. The policies exist not only to make sure we all have a baseline of what to expect from a resilience standpoint, but we believe, this is the hill that I'm going to die on. We believe so strongly that data protection is the core of cybersecurity that we have invested in armies of PhD cryptographers to basically download their entire wealth of information, put it in our platform, which is used by the 6 out of the 10 largest financial institutions in the world, 4 out of the 5 largest Western banks, right? They all agree that it's not scalable for them to go out and find their own PhD cryptographers. They're looking for a scalable, modernized platform, and they're doing it today.
I'd say, I guess maybe 2 things. The first thing is, me personally, stop being comfortable with my data being exposed, right? Just as a citizen of the world, we've become so accustomed to data breaches and our information being out there for the public, and taking a hard stance as an individual in terms of protecting my own information, right? And I think inevitably that type of mantra will start to move towards the policies and rules that the government ultimately implements within their organizations. So from an actual technology standpoint and PQC standpoint, I think the key takeaway that I would have is start your crypto agility process now. Because for me, IT agility is crypto agility. And there's things that you can start doing now to start putting those different measures in place. tracking your information. So SquarePeg, we do data across the board, data governance, data lineage, and a part of it is starting there at instituting pieces of data lineage. That way you can start understanding where things are, because that's the starting point, right? Just trying to figure out where to start.
I would say, just like with any complex problem, break it down and then divide and conquer, right? So generally, if you think about the problem, you can think about 3 big buckets, right? So first, you're probably going to have the cloud service providers, right, that you're using, and you're going to want to know, well, what are they doing for this? I think the good news that, they are working with this. For instance, I know, Amazon AWS has been, working for a long time now in terms of incorporating, quantum-resistant, cryptography into their stack, right? So that's going to be probably something you have to do less on directly, but understand what they're doing, right? Then there's going to be your other vendors that are not CSPs. You should be having conversations with those other vendors to understand what is their plan to incorporate, FIPS validated PQC into their products in a crypto agile way. And if they look at you like deer in the headlights, they don't have a plan, maybe you need to plan to get different vendors, right? So that's going to be the second bucket. And the lastly, there's going to be the third bucket is all the stuff that you control directly, right? It's going to be your own infrastructure, your own applications. And this may be 20% of your overall environment, but I think the 80-20 rule applies. It's probably going to be 80% of your effort to deal with that third piece, like your own custom apps and all of that. So get started on that now, and going back to my previous point, treat this as an agile project, iterative. Understand what you have, see what you can start remediating, adopt this idea of continuous improvement. How do we get more quantum secure tomorrow than we are today? And as you do that, certainly be thinking about how do we do this in a crypto agile way, and how do we, as part of this, build up a cryptographic asset management program that's essentially part of your overall risk management program, not some siloed activity.
Yeah, I think my advice would be is don't think about this as a post-quantum problem. I think organizations think, oh, quantum computers are going to be 10 years away. I got time. I can wait. Think about this as a cryptology problem. And again, Kat, you've talked about it as you're going to do your discovery and inventory, and you're going to find problems. And these problems need to be addressed like now. And it probably has absolutely nothing to do with post-quantum cryptography. So don't think about this as a post-quantum problem. Think about this as a cyber problem. Think about this as a foundational encryption problem that you need to address now, but do it in an agile way that will allow you to then, once you better understand or feel like there's the need to move to post-quantum encryption, you have the ability to do that. But again, I think fundamentally, don't get wrapped around the axle that this is a quantum problem and quantum's not going to be it. This is a cryptology and a cyber problem, and you need to start by understanding what the problem is and where it's at, and then use current tools today to remediate it.
So Harvey, I think I saw something on LinkedIn. You guys are having a webinar on Tuesday. Do you want to?
Yeah, so we're going to be hosting a webinar Tuesday, delving more into just this situation here, right? On really, you need to take a solution-based approach to solving this, not a technology-based approach. Jacques is going to be joining me, and how you can take solutions, best-in-class solutions like Sandbox, like SafeLogic, wrap them around a services engagement that helps you generate the required reports, do the gap analysis. Again, I think some of this is back to what you were saying. It's a large. It's not up to an individual like buy a tool and plug it in. It's a program, and you have to set the program up to be able to run on an annual basis. And so you need help doing that, right? And so, that's what Jacques and I are going to be talking about, is how you bring these best of breed solutions together in an overall approach that allows you to become compliant and crypto agile, right, to solve your problems now. But then as you look to the future, you have a pathway to do that.
No, thanks, Harvey. Thanks, Kat. So next Tuesday, I'm looking forward to really kind of diving into our entire solution and what it can do to move organizations forward. And I think just at a high level, I think my purpose here is to educate. I really want to educate because on the CASPA, I believe in this, right? As a person who's worked in the national security sector for my entire career, I believe in what I do. And I believe that this is a real problem. So my point is just education, education, and education, because we have the tools, techniques, and we have a great team. We partner with SafeLogic, we're partnered with Sandbox. We have the right team to put this together, but it's not about that. It really is about just everyone thinking about this holistically as a whole. That way, because we can't solve it ourselves, and when you think broadly just in terms of bigger quantum, if we're really gonna move the needle, it's gonna take all of us to participate.
Any final questions from online or here local? Online? Yep.
An online question. What should our federal government be doing to prepare for PQC when the vast amount of PII data captured by nation-state actors like OMB data, commercial, will be dumped on the dark web?
So start now. I mean, the problem you've got with the question is a lot of that data is already out there. So it's gone. It's like the horse is out of the barn, the train's left the station. We can't do anything about it. But what you can do now is start, figure out through doing your inventory, right, and your discovery, how is it leaking? What are the problems that we've got? And then have tools like SafeLogic and others to actually do that remediation. But if you just sit back and wait and say, well, data's out there, well, it's going to keep going unless you do something to stop it now. So my comment would be is, it's out there, we can't get it back. So you need to start now to put a plan in place to fix it.
Oh, I think we also acknowledge the fact that data lives, right? It has a shelf life. It has a utility point. So whatever is taken as a part of this store now, decrypt later, we really can't do anything to change that, but we can change all of the data that we protect now that we are going to generate in the future. And when I say data, we should not just be thinking about our PII, we should be thinking about our intellectual property, right? So Christopher Wray, cybersecurity director at the FBI, has said that China has amassed and stolen, I've got nods in the room and I like that, more in our intellectual property than any other nation state combined, right? So if we want to continue being a force for change and innovation as a country in relation to what's happening around the world, we have to care about data protection from an IP standpoint.
Any other questions? All right, with that, I'm going to thank the panel for doing a great job. Let's give them a round of applause.